Welcome to the Christian Care Ministry Association of Churches. Of course, our topic for this evening is Dietary Apologetics. I'm going to be talking about how the American lifestyle causes most of the diseases we face and how lifestyle changes can reduce health-related risk and reverse disease. Before we actually dive into the topic, I'd like to tell you again who we are and what we believe. And I'll introduce myself as well. Quickly, in 2 minutes, Christian Care Ministry offers a number of services that include MediShare, which brings Christians together to share medical bills on a non-profit basis as an alternative to traditional health insurance. You can find more information at medi-share.org. We also have MANA, which is Christian Disability Sharing. MANA functions a lot like AFLAC, but with a biblical concept that Christians should join together to support each other when we're in times of need, maybe that take us out of the workplace, and that's more information to be found at manacds.org. Our Health Initiatives Department provides innovative health solutions. You can find articles, audio, video, and a number of resources at ccmhi.org. That stands for Christian Care Ministry Health Initiatives. That's ccmhi.org. And one of the services our Health Initiatives Department offers is Restore. And Restore provides telephone-based health coaching and materials for people in very focused programs that last anywhere from 6 months to 12 months. You can find more at restorenow.org. And this presentation was put together for our Association of Churches. We reach out to pastors, staff members, and congregations and the congregations themselves to encourage optimal health so that we can better serve our Lord and Savior right up until He calls us home. We don't want to be cutting our ministries short. Well, we believe that God has called us to be good stewards of all that He's placed in our care, including our bodies. And we believe that by taking care of our body, we honor God, and we reduce our risk for disease and increase our chances for a longer disability-free life. I think this is important because we can eliminate a lot of the medical costs and burdens and heartache that families face these days, and we can redirect those funds to more worthwhile missions and other needs if we're taking care of ourselves. And if we're applying ourselves to be stewards in all areas, including our body, I believe that we can better serve God in every area of life, including spiritual, relational, vocational, and recreative areas. And we know that excellent health is not a function of diet alone, but it includes a relationship with God, relationships and intimacy with people, meaningful work consistent with our talents, a clear conscience, exercise, and the ability to manage stress. However, tonight we will be talking a lot about our diets. And before we get into this topic, I'd like to tell you my name is John Reinhold. I work in the Health Initiatives Department at Christian Care Ministry. I've been working there for over 5 years, developing programs and services for our members. And my undergraduate degree was in corporate and community health and wellness. My graduate degrees were in wellness and gerontology, and recently I completed a MBA program. Without further ado, let's start talking about our topic this evening. Here we're looking at the U.S. food consumption by calories. And you'll notice that 51% of our calories come from refined and processed foods. And that would include obvious things like donuts and potato chips, but maybe and white bread, but maybe less obvious things like brown bread. That's really just it's sold as a wheat product, but it's really just white bread with a tan. You have to be looking for ingredients like whole grain in the ingredients list. So there's a lot of ways you can be confused into buying refined foods, maybe wheat thins and wheat crackers, those types of things, which are really refined and processed foods. And you might be thinking you're buying a health food. We eat 42% of our calories from dairy and animal foods. And that's where we get our primary source of saturated fat. It comes from cheese. And we get all of our cholesterol from dairy and animal products. And we know that the combination of the cholesterol and the saturated fat and the trans fats that are often put into processed foods are the primary causes for many of the disease processes we face today. And we'll be looking at that in further detail as we go along this evening. You'll better know how it impacts your health and causes heart disease and diabetes and strokes and other processes that I know we all want to avoid. And those foods also do not have very much in the way of vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and phytochemicals. Actually, we only get 7% of our calories from fruits and vegetables, and the fruits and vegetables contain all of our antioxidants and phytochemicals and most of our vitamins and minerals. And the bad news there, on top of the bad news that it's only 7%, is that about half of those calories come from French fries. So when you really look at the details here, we're only getting 3% of our calories from fruits and vegetables, the protective elements that protect us from cancers and heart disease and strokes. And it's no wonder that we face a lot of the conditions we do today. Let's look at this next slide here. It shows a picture of what a typical American family eats in a week. And should there be any surprise that you see several bags of chips along the right side, and you see a lot of Diet Cokes and soft drinks and different juices. You see a good section that includes fast food, Burger King, McDonald's, and a couple pizzas. You'll see some meats and servings of dairy in there, and maybe a few token grapes and other fruits or vegetables that really don't account for very many calories in their diet. And I think that's representative of the previous slide. And why is that? Well, when you look at our next slide here, you'll notice that the calorie difference in 200 calorie portion sizes. Well, 200 calories of broccoli would be the equivalent of a large head of broccoli. Or if you look at fruit, 200 calories of apples would be a large apple or maybe a couple of medium-sized apples. You compare that to a processed food, 200 calories of potato chips could fit in the palm of your hand, and 200 calories of French fries would also fit in the palm of your hand. And this is a pretty obvious example of the contrast between healthy and unhealthy. Most people recognize this, but people really need to understand that the healthy foods, the ones that are nutrient dense, have a lot of volume to them, so they make you feel full and they're satisfying. And I think that's important for people who are looking to lose weight or address other health risks, is we want to be satisfied when we eat a meal. So if we focus eating calories from healthy sources, we will feel satisfied, and we will be getting the nutrients to help retard the health risk factors we're addressing or the diseases we want to address. Let me move on. Our next few slides are coming from the Centers for Disease Control, and they show how obesity has increased across the U.S. And we're looking at body mass index over 30, and that's really just an equation. You can find it if you did a Google search on BMI or body mass index. It's an equation that takes into account height and weight, and it's standard for both men and women. And it's a pretty good tool for determining health risks. And you'll notice that most of the states here are in white. As they're starting to collect data, you'll see these states change colors or include color as we progress. So in 1985, you have a number of states that are light blue that show 10% of the population is obese, and the equivalent, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 other states that are between 10 and 14% obese. And we jump 5 years ahead to 1990, and we see that almost all states are at least 10% obese. And actually the majority are 10 to 14%. So you'll notice when we go from 1990 to 1994 now, we had to add a new category. Now none of the states are just 10% obese. Now they're at least 10 to 14% obese, and we have about equal number of states that are 15 to 19% obese. Well, 14 states that are 15 to 19% obese. And we jump from 1994 to 1999, you notice that we added another category. We have a beige category where more than 20% of the population is obese, and that makes up about half of our country. And now you only have a few states that are only 10 to 14% obese, and most of them are migrating towards the 15 and 19 and 20% obese. And when we move to 2004, which is the last slide that I have for collected data from the CDC, you'll notice that almost every state is at least 20 to 24% obese, but we also have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 states that are at least 25% or greater obesity in them. And if you ever actually look at the percentage of population that's overweight or obese, that would be about 80% of our population. 80% of our population is overweight and obese these days. So if you're at a normal body weight, you're actually abnormal. You're in the minority. And I'm sorry for pointing each one of you out that are in the minority or for making you feel uncomfortable, but this is the direction we're heading. And what kind of effect does this have on our country at large? The lack of nutrients and the excess weight that we carry around. Let's look at the major killers of Americans. We're looking at the percentages of all deaths between the ages of 55 and 75. 52% of our population dies of heart attacks, diabetes, and strokes. And 38% of our population dies from other types of cancers. That's 90% of our population, folks, that's dying from primarily lifestyle-related diseases. Heart attacks, diabetes, and strokes can, for the most part, be avoided completely, and many types of cancers can be completely avoided as well. And I have some proof to that effect of how we can avoid disease. Well, let's look at around the world and see the disease rates around the world and how they correlate to unrefined plant foods. So here we're looking at the ages of 55 to 75, death rates from people who've died from heart disease and cancer, and we're comparing that to the amount of unrefined plant foods that they consume. On the left side, you'll notice Western countries, Hungary, USA, Belgium, Sweden, Finland. And you notice that in the US or Hungary, for example, 80 to 90% of all deaths are related to heart disease and cancer. And you'll see the blue column shows that unrefined plant foods equal less than 10% of our total calories, consistent with previous information that I presented. And let's go all the way to the right side here, and you'll look at Western or more Eastern cultures, Korea, Thailand, and Laos. And you notice that they consume upwards of 90% of their calories from unrefined plant foods, yet they have less than 10% of their deaths coming from heart disease and cancer. And that's a stark contrast between what we're experiencing in the U.S. or in Western cultures and what they're experiencing in Eastern cultures. Now, this data was collected in the early 80s, and if you were to collect the same information today, you would find that it's starting to normalize because of our influence around the world. Now, if you go to Thailand, for example, you can find over 1,000 McDonald's in Thailand. And they're becoming more affluent, so they're starting to eat more like we do. And they're starting to die like more like we die. It's really difficult to avoid the cause and effect relationship between what we eat and how we die. But I'm encouraged by this because I've also have some research to show you this evening of how people change their outcomes by applying different principles. So we'll look into that a little bit later. This is what one family eats in Bhutan. This is a village between India and China, would be a good example of Eastern dietary habits. And you notice a large sack of grains on the right side. Most of their calories would be coming from those grains, and most everything else is either a fruit or a vegetable. Now, if they had a little more money, you might see a chicken in there or two, but this is a fairly large family. There's 11 people in this family, and almost everything is coming from a whole food, all their calories. Not to say that we need to eat that primitively, but there's great and delicious recipes that you can be preparing that are more consistent with a whole foods plant-based approach that is representative of having less disease. Let's look at this case study here, Mr. 290. This case study was presented by Dr. Clapper in a video called The Diet for All Reasons, and he takes the serum from a man he refers to as Mr. 290, the blood draw for a pre-op procedure. The man's going in for a bypass. And you notice the vial on the left is red at the bottom and mostly clear at the top. And that's the way most blood should look after it sits in a tube. And the vial on the right is also red on the bottom, and it's not as clear on the top. You notice that it's actually very thick. He describes it as looking milky, and when he shakes it, it's very viscous. It sticks to the side and doesn't really move around quite like normal blood would. Normal blood would be more viscous. And he asked the man what he had for dinner that evening, and the man goes on to describe how before he came in for the exam he had a hamburger, fries, and a Frosty. And what you're looking at is actually the fat from the cheese and the cheeseburger, and the fat from the meat and the fat from the dairy. All of that oozing in his blood and sticking to the sides of these tubes. And they go on to show how they pull this large cholesterol deposit out of his heart during the procedure. Here's another example of how these foods deposit themselves or don't deposit themselves in our coronary artery. Here we have a good artery on the left. This is from a teenager who died in a motorcycle accident. And you notice that the artery is very smooth and has a nice color throughout. It's a consistent color. It's some slight streaking, light streaking, but you also see some very identifiable holes. It looks maybe like somebody pushed a toothpick through the artery, about that size of a hole. And they're paired up next to one another. Those vessels go out to supply blood to the spinal column. Now look at the artery on the right, and you notice that it is very clogged. The artery on the right, I describe it as looking like a blended pizza, like somebody blended a pizza and then poured it into the artery. It's a lot of cholesterol deposits. You notice the waxy substances, and I challenge anybody to find some vessels that would supply blood to the any other part of the body there. And I think that's representative of how this disease process, whether it be heart disease or any other type of circulatory related disease, is not just limited to that specific area. It's impacting other areas of the body. Next we're going to look at a pair of kidneys. And you can see this kidneys on the left look very healthy. They're plump and red, and the artery is a consistent color, much like the previous one we saw, and it's very smooth. And the kidneys and the arteries on the right are very different. They don't look as plump and fresh. They don't have the same kind of color, and you notice that the artery has a white covering over the entire artery. And if you were to look at that a lot closer, you actually see a lot of flakes in there. And those flakes are, I mean, that's all the process, and how it's not just limited to one area of the body. This is a disease process, a circulatory process that can affect every area of the body. I'm going to show you how it affects the brain next. Here we're looking at a complete brain with all the tissue. And this next slide, we're going to look at a brain with that tissue removed. And what you're going to notice is parts of this brain are very clear. It actually looks somewhat like a jellyfish. You know, when you're looking at a jellyfish, it almost looks transparent. You can see the colors that are behind the arteries. And that's what the brain's supposed to look like. And in other parts of this brain, you would see a yellow, waxy-like substance. And those deposits are similar to the deposits you've noticed in the other areas of the body that I've shown you this evening, in the heart, or whether it be on the way down to the kidneys. And here we go. I think you should all be able to see it now. These deposits would be stopping the blood flow around the brain. So how well do you think somebody with this kind of blockage would be able to think? You also notice in the middle how some of the arteries are bulged, and it's representative of an aneurysm or stroke if it were to pop. But folks, we have good news. We know from a lot of different research, including that provided by Dr. Dean Ornish, that much of this process can be reversed. For example, when Dr. Dean Ornish did a study, he put groups of people into two different types of dietary plans. One was American Heart Association diet that included 30 milligrams of cholesterol and up to 30% of calories from fat. In that plan, heart disease actually progressed. And that's a shame, because the American Heart Association, you would think, is they are providing guidelines for people with heart disease. I mean, if you go and have a bypass surgery today, these are the guidelines the dietitian will prescribe for you to follow when you come out of that bypass surgery. That's what you're supposed to follow. And in more than 20 different studies these days, including Dr. Dean Ornish's, we've found that heart disease actually progresses. Well, Dr. Ornish's group went on a 5 milligram of cholesterol diet and less than 10% of calories from fat. And his group reversed heart disease. It didn't reverse overnight and clear up. It clears up over a period of time and may be representative of how long it takes for it to accumulate. Different people have different rates of progress. If you were to look at these two diets, if I was to describe them to you, American Heart Association diet looks something like moving away from eating a lot of processed foods and red meat to eating fewer processed foods and more white meats. And the Dr. Dean Ornish diet would be eating a significant portion of your calories from grains and no calories from, or very minimal animal products and no processed foods. I think he allowed for egg whites and a half to 1 cup of skim milk per day in his plan, just so that people will get B12. But I'm encouraged to know that those people reverse heart disease. Actually, one of his people did so well that within a period of time they were able to go from having chest pain where they couldn't barely shave or walk across the room to walking the equivalent of the Empire State Building on their Stairmaster. That's impressive, folks. And his group reported a 90% reduction in chest pain in as little as 3 weeks. So people went from not being able to function and enjoying normal activities of daily living to be able to enjoy normal activities. That's significant. And it addresses the root issue, which I think is clearly a large part due to the dietary habits. Let's look at some risk factors. A lot of people are paying close attention to their cholesterol these days. So let's see how some different approaches impacted LDL. LDL is your bad cholesterol. You can remember that by thinking L for lousy, and you want to keep it low. A good LDL level would be under 100, and ideal for those people with diabetes or other lifestyle-related disease would probably be under 70. Those are some standard guidelines. So you have on the far left a group following the Atkins high-protein diet, and they had no significant change in their LDL during the course of the study. You have another group following the Mediterranean diet, and they had no significant change in their LDL either. The group following the American Heart Association diet, standard low-fat advice, had a 6% lowering in their LDL levels, and we know that in more than 20 different studies has allowed heart disease to progress, so that's clearly not going far enough. The low-fat vegetarian group, which would be similar to the Dr. Dean Ornish approach, had a 16% lowering in their LDL levels. Cholesterol medications, or statins, produce a 26% lowering in LDL levels. But you have this other category here, this group following a high-nutrient plant-based diet approach, and they had a 33% lowering in LDL levels over the course of this program. This is the first study to actually show that a dietary approach can have more impact on LDL than medication. And I'm going to go on to describe in detail what a high-nutrient plant-based diet looks like if you don't already know what that means. Here's one example of a high-nutrient plant-based diet. This is one presented by Dr. Joel Fuhrman. He wrote a book called Eat to Live, and you can see his information here for how to find more about this. Well, eating a high-nutrient plant-based diet requires that you eat most of your calories from vegetables. That's why vegetables make up the base of the food pyramid. And then you see a significant portion of calories coming from fruits and beans in unlimited quantities, and then in limited quantities, depending on your goals, whole grains, raw nuts, and seeds. If you were athletic, of course, you would have to eat more, or if you were very thin and trying to maintain weight, you might eat more whole grains, raw nuts, and seeds. And then twice weekly or less would be fish or fat-free dairy, and once weekly or less poultry, eggs, oils, and rarely would be the beef, sweets, full-fat cheeses, milks, and processed foods that include hydrogenated oils. And if you want some other guidelines, you could focus on eating most of your nutrients from green vegetables. Those are the most nutrient dense, all raw vegetables, and then beans and legumes, eggplants, mushrooms, tomatoes, peppers, and fresh fruits. Those are all very nutrient dense, calorie light foods. So as you eat them, you become full, you take in fewer calories, and you're getting a significant portion of your calories from nutrients, which is very important to retard these disease processes that you now understand we deal with. On this last slide, we're looking at 3 different stomachs. The stomach on the far left shows 400 calories of oil. Oil has more calories than butter, by the way. And you notice how 400 calories of oil does not take up very much volume in the stomach. It will leave you feeling very hungry. 400 calories of chicken would take up more space in your stomach, but you can also see how you would be very hungry. Your stomach holds about 1 liter of food. And 400 calories of spinach, eggplant, and beans, on the other hand, fills you to the brim. I challenge anybody to try and eat 400 calories of spinach, eggplants, and beans, or some type of a salad. 200 calories of greens, spinach, or romaine would be about the size of one of the bags you could purchase, the pre-washed stuff at any grocery store these days. And then with the additional 200 calories, you could add a whole can of beans, rinse them thoroughly, heat them up, put them on there, and tomato and carrots and broccoli slaw and a number of other things, and you would have such a large amount of food. I challenge most people to try and eat that. And I think that's part of the neat thing that comes along with understanding these principles is you no longer have to weigh food or count calories if you follow these basic principles of trying to eat nutrient-dense, more calorie-light foods. Well, that concludes our presentation this evening. We only went for 30 minutes. I can open up for questions and answers. We can have a dialogue if you're able to join me on the conference call. I welcome any questions you might have this evening. And I can also take us back to any of the slides if you want to look at them and talk about them. You can feel free to use the chat feature to write a question, or again, you can use the conference call feature to dial in and ask a question. One thing that I'm thinking, reflecting on what we've talked about this evening, is some people maybe get the idea that, or the impression that we're saying you have to become a vegetarian to be healthy. And I think that really to prescribe a dietary plan that's appropriate, you need to take into consideration someone's goals. While there are some fundamental principles that we all should follow, I think we are unique, and different people have unique goals. For example, competitive wrestlers or athletes might have to focus on taking in more calories from whole grains and nuts and seeds. Somebody with heart disease really probably ought to, according to the literature, become a full-fledged vegan, someone who doesn't eat any animal products, because we know that that's what produces disease reversal. And someone who doesn't have significant health risk factors, maybe their waist size is within normal limits, their cholesterol is normal, and they've been a lifelong exerciser and such. Somebody like that would be able to eat, have more of a flexible approach. We call that a flexitarian. That would be similar to the approach I take. I monitor all of my health risk factors and know that I can be flexible with my approach. So you probably have to eat with me for a full week to find out that I'm not a vegetarian. I eat a lot of whole foods, and but I do eat some animal products here and there, and I don't think there's anything wrong with eating animal products. I think that it's all depends on the approach that's needed for your goals. See, Martha asked us a question. Could you tell me how red yeast rice affects blood cholesterol? Sure. Red yeast rice is a supplement that is promoted to lower cholesterol, and it's been studied and proven to lower cholesterol because it does have some of the properties that they actually use in cholesterol medications. Now, one of the cautions that I often read about is people taking red yeast rice should also monitor their liver function, because it impacts your health in the same way a cholesterol medication would. And some people find that it can lower their cholesterol significantly, and others find that doesn't make a very big impact. I think it really depends on why your cholesterol is high. Some people actually do have hereditarily high cholesterol, and it's very difficult to drive that down. And so combinations of medications or supplements and dietary changes are appropriate. And other individuals may find that just a little bit of red yeast rice can produce a cholesterol-lowering effect that they desire. Now, my personal belief is that we should make every effort to lower our cholesterol through dietary changes, because we know those are the safest, especially if you're applying principles like we talked about tonight. You're not going to hurt yourself eating a significant portion of your calories from nutrient-dense, vitamin-rich, antioxidant, and phytochemical-rich foods. So, and just for the fact that they can be so enjoyable and easy to make, I really don't see any reason why people can't apply that as a foundation for going forward, and then reassess or work with their physician to assess the need for medications or supplements. And there is also a lot of debate. You'll see if you typed in red yeast rice on a search today, you would find a number of articles talking about how that supplement is becoming more regulated, and they may be removing the cholesterol lowering property of the red yeast rice by law now. And so you need to explore that to be sure that you're getting a good source, because one supplement to another is not always the same. So and I really can't make any recommendations for red yeast rice. You have to do your own search on that. If you go to our website at ccmhi.org, you could type in red yeast rice, and I think you'll come up with some information. We also have some good audio regarding cholesterol, because that's obviously your goal if you're considering cholesterol-lowering supplements. So I tell you to check out the resources on our website. The audio section at ccmhi.org has some great information. You can continue your study in your car, or download in your MP3 player and listen to it on the go. And just listen to the audio related to blood pressure and cholesterol or heart disease. Some really good stuff out there, and some great articles as well. You can search through our search topics. Do you have any questions? Any other questions out there? That was a good one. There's a good book written by Dr. Furman called Cholesterol Protection for Life. It's one of the resources we make our members aware of, and he talks about different supplements and how they can impact your health for the good or for the bad, and he talks about addressing these issues with solid dietary approach and appropriate exercise. Dr. Furman, if you hear us talking about him in passing, he's not a Christian physician. He's secular, so you can be praying for him whenever you see him writing about things that don't exactly line up with our Christian beliefs. Maybe if he ever refers to the way we've evolved, sometimes he refers to the way we've evolved or the way God designed us. He really seems to go back and forth and waffle between those two conclusions, so I'll warn you about that first, and then tell you that he does provide a lot of research-based information. What impacts HDL levels more, diet or exercise? HDL is primarily impacted by exercise. So you need to have a solid exercise routine that's appropriate for your conditioning level and medical history, and it needs to be aerobic, meaning that you maintain a target heart rate for an extended period of time, and you should work up into a comfortable aerobic range. I think standard guidelines today are at least 30 minutes most days of the week, preferably all days of the week, and that can be as simple as walking or applying yourself in the different ways in a gym on the aerobic equipment or whatnot. And a great way to make sure that you're exercising in a target heart range is to buy a heart rate monitor, and you can get those pretty cheap these days at places like Walmart or online, probably in the $40 to $50 range. Polar makes a great heart rate monitor. Your diet habits can affect HDL as well. If you were eating a significant amount of hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated oils, those have been known to impact HDL levels and drive them down. HDL is your good cholesterol. You want to actually have that be higher. It's protective. You can think of it as the cholesterol that is actually cleaning the arteries. H can remember happy. Happy, H, you want it to be high. HDL levels. If you wanted some more information about cholesterol and how different products can affect your body or HDL levels, or no specific information about LDL levels, or just to have a conversation with us, you could also call us if you're a Medishare member or interested in Medishare. Call our Health Initiatives Department. We'd be happy to speak with you. We have a small group this evening, and our number is 800-264-2562, and our department extension would be pound 2911. Or if you got the operator by dialing 0, you would be able to request to speak with our Health Initiatives Department. Well, I'm still waiting for a few more questions. If anybody would like to ask, feel free to type them in the chat or join us on the conference line, 218-862-6114. The code is 393718. Does coffee affect cholesterol? I do not hear a lot about how coffee affects cholesterol. I'm not aware of its impact on cholesterol. I hear more about caffeine, which is the concern with coffee, and how caffeine can impact blood pressure, the blood pressures of some individuals. But and there's controversy over how much coffee may or may not be healthy. One conservative approach would be to limit it to a cup of coffee a day, and if you're drinking a significant amount of coffee, I'd be concerned about the amount of caffeine your body's having to deal with. Oh, Sam made a good comment that people adding milk or creamer to their coffees that could impact cholesterol. You know, it's interesting in our Restore program when we work with individuals on a regular basis, the things that we find impact cholesterol. We have some individuals, they go completely vegan, and they find just to prove us wrong, that their cholesterol was hereditary and it drops 100 points in as little as 3 weeks, and they're totally surprised. And then they decide to see how much these different products impact, or foods impact their cholesterol. And we've had individuals just try to eat a couple servings of chicken. Everything else was vegan and high nutrient plant-based. They were eating most of their calories from whole foods, and they added chicken a couple times a week and their cholesterol went up 20, 30, 40 points. We had other people who they did everything vegan, they just decided to add in milk. Their cholesterol went up 50 points. They get rid of the milk and it goes down. We have other individuals who have been completely vegan, but they added eggs, and eggs alone impacted their cholesterol. They were eating the yolks. And so each of the animal products in and of themselves can impact cholesterol, and different people react different ways. Some people may find that their cholesterol actually doesn't drop very much, and one interesting fact to know when you look at the case studies that come out of Dr. Dean Ornish's research is he felt going into the study that people would have to have their cholesterol down in the range of 150 to be healthy, and he was surprised to find that some of the people who had cholesterol as high as 300 actually produced heart disease reversal, but they were only the individuals who applied the principles 100%. So if they were applying the vegetarian type approach, it seemed to lower their, or increase the amount of blood flow and decrease the amount of blockage in their arteries, regardless of whether their cholesterol came down. However, you can't generalize that and say it's going to be true for everybody, so you really should work with your physician to address each of these issues as is appropriate for you. Is rebounding a good exercise? I think rebounding is a great exercise, but I wouldn't limit yourself to just rebounding. I think we should exercise in a variety of different ways and not just focus on one exercise habit. So whether you're a runner or a rebounder or somebody who's a speed walker, I think it's important to mix up your routine and cross-train. Your body can get used to whatever you're doing, and if you cross-train, you'll find that you may get better results. So consider that when if you're rebounding regularly. Try different approaches. Walking with a weight vest, maybe walking and light jogging if your knees can handle it, riding a bike, rebounding. One nice thing about rebounding is that you can do it in the winter months indoors, and it's just jumping on a small trampoline. But also one thing you should take into consideration if you're rebounding is monitor your heart rate. There's great heart rate calculators out there. They're pretty easy to find if you did a Google search on them. I expect if you're joining us this evening you know how to use Google or different internet searches, so just search target heart rate and figure out what your target heart rate is, and purchase a heart rate monitor, or get familiar with how to take your heart rate with your fingers by placing them on your wrist or on your carotid artery in your neck, and check to see whether you're exercising in your target heart range. I think that's one of the main keys to having a good exercise routine, and it should be progressive as well. You shouldn't just exercise at the same pace all the time, whether it's strength training or aerobic. You should work at increasing speed or distance, or exerting yourself if you were exercising on a treadmill by raising the elevation and changing things up. And one thing you may see that's different if you were to study people who rebounded versus those who walk versus those who walk with a weight vest is the impact and stress it puts on the bones. And another great byproduct of exercise is strengthening bones, and bones strengthen along the lines of stress, and so whether you're stressing them with strength training or with aerobic activity, you'll be wise to vary your activities so that the routines will have a good impact. So rebounding, for example, takes a lot of the impact out of the exercise, which is nice if you have bad knees or want to avoid them, but you also take some of the stress off the joints, which is good for good for the different bones. So walking with a weight vest is a great way to put stress on your bones to encourage strengthening. And strength training, of course, is another great way to add to and produce strong bones. We have a great audio on our website called Strong Bones for Life that examines how the pharmaceutical industry really promotes taking drugs to promote strong bones, but how that may not be in your best interest. You can consider the research that they're presenting and talk about it with your physician, but they really talk about how exercise addresses the issues, and there's a lot of data manipulation that goes into promoting the bone strengthening drugs. And that's a very interesting audio to explore and consider, especially if you're a woman or a woman over the age of 50. Now, if we don't have any other questions this evening, we'll go ahead and close. I'd like to take a few minutes just to close in prayer. And Lord, we thank you for a time to come together to consider how you would have us be good stewards in any area of life. I'd ask that your Spirit would convict us and that you would continue to encourage us and put opportunities for growth in our path. We thank you for Christian Care Ministry and how it reaches out to Christians, whether it be through sharing medical bills when we have a medical crisis or we're taken out of work, and we can support one another by providing supplemental income, or through our health initiatives programs and the Association of Churches. It reaches out to restore the health of your people. Lord, we ask that these principles would be encouraging people to restore their health so that they can serve you and serve you more efficiently and effectively. Lord, we thank you for your Son and how he inspires us to reach out to others and